Imagine being pulled into a cosmic battle inside the human body, where microscopic dragons, arrogant angels, and one very stubborn girl must work together to save a single boy's life and the entire universe. I'm Space Admiral Kandas.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
This is Sci-Fi Book Pod, and today we are chatting about A Wind in the Door, the sequel to Madeleine L'Engle's beloved classic, A Wrinkle in Time, with our visiting dignitary, sociologist, and life coach, Valerie Friedlander. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, so you have told me that this is your favorite book of all time. Share with us why.
It's not because it is a high quality book to start off. It is a children's story, and yet it hits on some really powerful topics about who we are as human beings. And that's what I love about it, is the aspect of understanding ourselves in the cosmos beyond just all of the hither and thither, but really inviting people into what does it look like to be yourself in a world that is constantly pushing you to be not yourself. What does it matter? Why is that important? So it looks at the micro individual to the macrocosmos and even beyond the individual to the inner workings. And I don't think that, as far as a sci-fi book, it's not very accurate in terms of it's science. But I don't think that's the point. So I think it's really easy to go in with a critical eye and go, well, this is wrong and that is wrong. And I could totally do that too. There are several things in terms of cohesion with the previous book, like when we talked about A Wrinkle in Time, and you'd think that Meg would have learned the lesson of stop always hoping that other people will come and save the day and fix everything for you. Learn how to step up and take some you'd think she would have learned that. So that was one of the things that irritates me about that book and rereading it. It's just like, Meg, come on, you learned this lesson. Stop hoping that somebody else is going to fix it for you. I also think that there's a very human quality to that in this world. I think there's a lot of desire of, gosh, it's really awful and it feels completely overwhelming and so much bigger than me. What can I do? Why doesn't somebody with more power come in and fix this? I think there's just such a humanness about it. Just to be specific to the book, I love the idea of naming. As a word nerd, I love to dig into what does this word mean and what does it mean to you and what does it mean to me and how do these things match or don't match and how that influences communication. And they talk about the difference between communication and communion. What does it mean to really be with somebody versus just talk to them? So often we're talking at people. We're seeing them through ourselves, and we're not always bringing our best self to it. But that idea of speaking to someone's best self, speaking, and I hate the term best self, but speaking to who they are, not who they've learned to be, who they've adapted to be, who they are behaving as in that moment, but who they truly are and who they can be. And speaking to that person is a way of naming that person, combating the forces that would unname people, that would help people disconnect from that light inside of themselves, that would push people to choose their pleasure. And I don't say I think pleasure is important, right? I think there are so many ways you could interpret some of the things in this, like the idea of self-pleasure, the idea of emotions. There are so many narratives in our ethos that say these things are bad. And I don't think that's what Madeleine is saying. But I think it's really easy to interpret it in some of those ways because they're so pervasive. Emotions are difficult. And sometimes we have to allow them to be and see past them so that we can really see somebody else, because our emotions are very personal. They're part of us. They're part of how we understand the world. And to really see somebody, not just through our own lens of emotion, but to listen to them, we do have to step to the side of that and see beyond that. And the idea of, if I'm only self-focused, that individualism, I can be destructive and I lose sight of who I truly am as someone who's connected and part of everything and everyone. And so that balance, again, looking at it through the social lens, I think there are pieces that are really easy to get sidetracked into the common narrative that actually is an unnaming, in my opinion. And to really listen to what's actually being said, and that idea of really loving somebody else.
Yeah, the concept of individuality is really
Mhm.
strong here. To be fair, the book was written in 1968, so science has evolved. So when you think about this book as a work of fantasy and fiction, science fiction, instead of science, and that's true with any science fiction, you just have to remove yourself from the science in the book and enjoy the story.
And it's got my favorite character in it too, Prognoski's the cherubim. I love the attitude, the imagination of Prognoski's and the gifts of Prognoski's. I also really love Mr. Jenkins because I think I see myself a lot in Meg and Mr. Jenkins as an adult
Yeah.
now, but seeing other people and recognizing that the journey of Mr. Jenkins, I think, is really powerful.
So Mr. Jenkins and Prognostis have something in common. They're both grumpy characters who really are good people, which reminds me of somebody else in this room. So
No,
Shane,
no.
Shane, you actually didn't like the book. Give us the
It's
other
not
side of
it's
the
not
story.
it's not that I didn't like the book. It's just based on it remind me of the Magic School Bus. As we do more of these books, as we do more of the sci-fi stuff, that we're gonna run into a lot of the same story over and over and over. And there's only like 4 or 5 stories, and they're all interpreted different ways. I was kind of thinking, okay, well, what should we focus on besides doing saying the same thing over and over and over? So this book, I didn't have a lot of time to listen to it, and so it's probably me, but I was getting irritated at the end. And you're right. It was basically is that, okay, Meg, didn't we just do this again? Didn't we just have this thing? But in a sense, we never learn either. Humans don't we don't. We just don't learn. The thing was what got me was that she pulled you into the garden, the sacred garden, and then brung the snake in. And to save her brother, she had to go inside the body. Then she had to go inside the heart. As Charles Wallace was getting inundated by the world, he was dying. He was like 5 or 6 or he's 6 years old. So Wallace, you're supposed to act like a 6-year-old. Wallace, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this, do this. And so he was not just getting beat up by physical people. He was getting beat up by basically, you got to be stupid, Wallace, to be a fit in. You have to lower yourself so you can communicate with others. And when I say lower yourself, I'm not saying you're higher in IQ, though that got to be the case. You just may have more experience than everybody in the room. And if they try to bump him up a grade, all right, he's going to be looked at differently. So no matter where that kid goes, and what the theme was, in my opinion, was that basically the teacher, the principal, the parents, his mom was even saying the same thing, was that basically because Meg wanted to protect her little brother. He says, why can't you do something? Why can't you do something? Why can't you do something? And what they kept on telling her is this, look, he has to figure this out himself. If he doesn't figure this out himself now, then when he gets older, he's going to have a real difficult problem, dealing with people kind of thing. And so Meg was trying to find somebody to help. She needed a support team, and that's a lot different than basically doing it, like saying you got to do it yourself. And I think we're really getting that. I think in America, especially in America, pull yourself out of your bootstraps. I am 58 years old. I don't know anybody who has ever done anything by themselves. Not one person. In a sense, the naming part, that's the truth. Because anything else that is lie. Because they're trying to form it. But if you name it, then it becomes a reality. And that's the one thing they don't want you to do. They don't want you to name it. And when I say they, which is a collective of basically a society in a way, and that's what was trying to eat at Charles, was that the collection. And I think that's what as I talked this through, I think that's why she went to the micro scale, that shrinkage, and they're all small and this and time is like, centuries for basically one heartbeat.
Something that you said about the bootstraps, I think that society is, and I'm talking about on a global scale, is going through a paradigm shift right now. And it's not towards fascism, it's actually towards community. that we have been so isolated. All we want is to find people who we agree with to talk about the things that we enjoy. And that can be sci-fi, that can be podcasting. The reason why Valerie and I know each other is because I was lonely and I was looking for other podcasters to talk to about podcasting. We constantly want to find people like us
Yes.
to talk to. Putting Charles Wallace in this predicament where he can't be who he really is doing a disservice to everyone, because there are other people like Charles Wallace. Not very many, but you can find them.
Right.
Well, it's like
Right.
the Ecthroy message is, just be self-focused but be like everybody else, right? Like, don't have a name. You don't need to be unique. You just need to be like all of us and not care about anything. And it's like those two things really don't go together.
No.
Because like it's and I think that's the reason why there's the nothing that happens there, is because you can't have existence. When you do that, it just, there is nothing. And I thought that idea of, I really struggled when I was first reading this book again, because I remember it as a kid. I read it to my kids too. But like reading it and thinking about it, this whole adapt to your environment. And I was really struggling with. But so what I like is how she kind of digs in to these ideas. And yeah, if you get hung up on one thing, you miss the truth of what's being said. And it is that you still need to be true to yourself. Like, there are spaces where, like the fitting in makes sense, but don't lose yourself when you go into those spaces. And when you are most yourself, like how Prognoskis asks Meg, like, when are you most you? And what did you see? What did you do? How did you see somebody else? What happened? And really exploring that. I think those are some really powerful questions to look at. When am I most me? What does it mean to be most me? And it's like, well, I wasn't even thinking about myself. I was just doing the thing that I do. I was just connecting with this person without even thinking about it. We were just together. We were communing, and I wasn't caught up. So it was like, it's this really powerful idea of how when we are our most us, our most unique self, we fit together. And the opposite is that nothing. And I was thinking about the nothingness. That was the thing that terrified me, but also how attractive that is to some people, because it feels like, oh, it'll be safe somehow.
The concept around the book is that Charles Wallace is ill, and there is something going on inside of his mitochondria that needs to be repaired. And when that becomes repaired, then the universe becomes repaired. That inside of our human body is a lot of blank space. Like, we have our organs, and we have our nervous system, and we have our veins and our arteries, but everything else is in between space, which is what the universe is like. There's a lot of empty space, and then you have your planets and your suns and your asteroids and your meteors, right? Our bodies and space are a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Correlation? Analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Analogy. Yeah.
So I really loved that correlation.
Well, you ever seen those where basically they start out like the camera or the vision goes way off in space, goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and then it reverses and it goes to the planet and it goes on and on. It goes to the human being, goes to the molecular structure, and so on and so on. How they're comparing that both of them are exactly the same in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I said is that basically she went inside. The first book went outside, so she went inside, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I love that question. Where are you? Where doesn't matter. It's like, and that one piece, I don't know that I will use a term from another sci-fi book that I love is grok.
Yeah, that empty space is extremely important, but extremely scary. And as they say, basically, there's a void. You must fill the void. Nature doesn't like feeling an empty void. Human beings will fill that void, and usually it will fill that void with just nonsense and basically evil, usually the baddest thoughts. Humans will always go to the bad one before they go to the good one. It's a DNA instinct, flight or fear.
Another thing that I really loved in this book is how she pulls out these different roles, these different spaces, that opportunities, ways people are, that it's not everybody is a teacher. Not everybody is a namer. Not everybody is all of these things. But when you
Yeah.
know yourself, you can show up and really see somebody else. And then you can commune together to create in the role that you are there to create from. There is always a balance and ebb and flow. And so what does it matter? What does one thing, one person matter? Well, but you do, because you're part of the balance. You're part
Mhm.
of the cosmos, even as microscopic as your cell to you, to, like that
Right.
flow. But the idea of the lesson, like the teacher doesn't even know what you need to learn. They're just there to support you with whatever it is that you need, and you don't have to know. Like, you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to step in knowing what it is. You're going to have to figure it out. And that's just part of it, is figuring it out and then trusting that you have within you what you need to figure it out. And you're not going to do it alone,
No.
right? Everybody was paired at least with one other person, but then they brought in more people. And that idea of we don't know what the next challenge that we're going to face is. If we show up with love being the action, not a feeling, but like the way you engage with another person and to engage with yourself, you'll rise to the occasion. You'll be able to engage it, or you'll do the next thing that you need to do, whatever that next thing is.
Through the book, she's hit a couple archetypes. Joseph Campbell plays around with this a lot. And but the thing is that the teacher, not the teacher, the principal, what was his name?
Mr. Jenkins.
Jenkins. The shoes. Okay. And he gives him his shoes. He gives him shoes. And Calvin's shoes, because he needed shoes. And so you have this in the act of kindness through this rough and tumble kind of guy, or baseless guy who perceives himself as.
But he didn't just give him a new pair of shoes. He made sure that they didn't look
That's
new
what I
when he
mean.
gave them to him.
That's
Yeah.
what I mean. That's what I mean. And the thing is, because what he did was little things, very small things. And so what I'm trying to get at is that that's an archetype. If you were a person who grew up around that age, there was always somebody, I don't know who, your neighbor, somebody passing by, really. It could be your uncle, it could be a teacher, it could be anybody. Oh, you'll need this. Oh, you'll need this. And they'll give this to you without question, and they'll try, and well, if you're a decent human being, they won't ask for a thank you. They will not ask for, oh, praise me because I gave this to you, kind of thing. There's no ego in it. It's just something that basically another human being, an older human being, looks upon another human being, younger human being, because that's the process, and says, oh, you'll need this on your travels. Or I can see your skill, so you're going to need this. Okay. So that's an act of kindness, but it's also act of archetype. When I say archetype, is that because you do not have 8 billion people on the face of this earth without the majority, or the primary archetype being kindness. And that kindness is always basically, I'm 58. I go about as far as I can go to about here. All right. And there's somebody behind me, and they're coming up behind me. All right. And then they'll look at him and they go, oh, you need a pair of shoes, bud, because you need to go here. Here's some shoes. All right. And then goes a little further than the next person. He is through his experiences.
Yeah.
He says,
Brings
and
it,
so on.
circles back to the bootstrap thing. Nobody pulls themselves up by the
Yeah. No,
bootstraps. Everybody has
no.
someone who helps
That's an
them.
illusion. That's
Yeah.
an illusion of, I'll give you this. That is an illusion of evil. Is because and that's where basically I don't name you anymore, because what that does is that, oh, I didn't need anybody.
Yeah. We're not in relation.
Yeah.
We are no longer in relation with one another.
Exactly.
So let's talk about naming when it was 5 Mr. Jenkins, right? There were 5 Mr. Jenkins. There were 3.
There started with 3, and then it kind of multiplied in the mitochondria. So there
Yeah.
were more.
Yeah. It's,
But there was only one real Mr. Jenkins,
Yes.
and he's the one who owned the name.
Yeah. Well, he was the one who encompassed all of the things that were him, that made him who he was. And it's one of the things when I mentioned the journey of Mr. Jenkins, there's that moment where the first test where Megan has to figure out which one is the real Mr. Jenkins. And she asks each of them what are they going to do about Charles Wallace? And they have these different answers. That doesn't tell her who the real Mr. Jenkins is. But it's an interesting reflection on these different approaches to helping a child who clearly needs something. But yes, so there's this tension between adapting and fitting in and being oneself, and what is Mr. Jenkins going to do? And we're left at the end without knowing exactly what Mr. Jenkins is going to do, but we know it's going to be different than what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine it's not going to be any of the answers that were given before, because none of them came from love. And that begs the question, well, what is it to love someone? And I think it's in the moment. It's in each moment. It is in, oh, I noticed that you needed new shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that I can do. Even with someone who has lost who they are so much, those moments of noticing and recognition and seeing matter. And they're little bits of understanding and naming someone. The one other thing that I wanted to say about the idea of the teacher is how the teachers are so different. Right? We don't know who's going to be our teacher. But if we're listening, we can sense it. Like Louise the Larger, the snake. Like, she's a teacher. And you can kind of tell. Like, so teachers could be anyone, anything. And that ties to, there's so many different ideas of who is our teacher. If we look at Native teachings, like the earth is our teacher, we just don't listen to it anymore. You know, we've shut off that connection. The X-ray have X'd that relationship, and we need to rebuild it. We need to reconnect to it.
Basically, anybody be a teacher, nature could be a
Anybody
teacher.
can be. The naming thing.
Yeah.
The naming in I forget which tradition. It might be Judaism, where you wait a few days for the child. You don't name the child. You don't pick a name ahead of time. You might have names you like, but you wait for the kid to be born to meet them and see them and know them, and then you name them.
Yeah. That's in a lot of different traditions.
And I think there are several traditions that do that, but that's that idea of waiting to know that person in the world, like as separate from another person, to see them, and then that's where their name is. And that ties into like Sporos. So Sporos is the name, but like he's not really named until he deepens.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of deepening is a whole nother, like, this space. We have to create this space for deepening. I mean, there's just so much in this book that I realized as I was listening really has informed directly, indirectly, spiritually, how I move in the world and why I do the work that I do as a coach. It was like, oh, this book isn't so much of, I mean, it's a little bit about my sociology. I mean, it's all related, but like, this is why, like, the idea of holding space for someone and the idea of helping them see themselves, helping them know their name. Essentially, I was like, oh, I think maybe I'm a namer. Maybe that's my role, is as a namer. It was so lovely to listen.
So, Valerie, this is a great time for you to plug the fact that you are also an audiobook narrator. Do you want to plug your book?
Yes. Okay. I have been narrating a series called Bumps in the Night. The first one is out. It's in the Mall of Madness, and I'm working on the next one, Nostalgic Nightmare, which, for anyone who has any level of nostalgia for the 90s, it's kids' books. It's really for like your tweens. But I really had a good time with the one that will be out in the near future, because there's so much 90s nostalgia in it. And it's just, it was fun for me to do. But yeah, I got into the audiobook narration thanks to Kandas and an interview she did. And I've always been told, because I read to my kids, I read to them out loud and I do voices. And everybody's like, you should totally do audiobook narration. I'm like, I don't know. And so after listening to Kandas's interview with Paul, I was like, maybe this is like not as far off as I think it is. So yeah, I started doing that, and it's gotten great reviews so far.
Cool.
Lots of
Yay.
compliments on my audiobook narration. So
Cool.
So,
Yeah.
for a plug for an upcoming episode of Sci-Fi Book Pod, Paul Heitch will be on the show, and we will be discussing Agency by William Gibson with Paul Heitch in February. So be sure to subscribe to Sci-Fi Book Pod so you don't miss that discussion. All right, Valerie, last word on the book. Who should be reading this book?
everybody.
You know, I didn't read it as a kid. I pulled a Shane just now. I'm giving my opinion, but I didn't read it as a kid. I read A Wrinkle in Time. I did not read this one or any of the other sequels. It felt really adult to me, like there was a lot of grown up themes in it. Reading it to your kid is a really good angle.
Yes, that was going to be my next thing. I think everybody should read it. Don't not read it because you don't have a kid. But if you do have a kid, especially, I would say a good age for introducing it is probably, I think 3rd grade is when I read it to my kids. But my kids are a little advanced in reading. I don't know why they would be that way.
Because you read to them.
But yes, because I read to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that is probably a good early intro, but they'll enjoy it. They won't get all the things you get out of it, but it'll keep you engaged. There are plenty of kids' books that you're like, why am I reading this? You could just learn to read and read this to yourself, but this is not one of them.
Well, it's not that long of a book either. I
No.
mean,
And it's worth doing. The third one that we're going to talk about next time, I do not think is as kid friendly. The first 2 are very kid friendly. The third one when I was young, we went to automatically, and it is too adult in terms of its concepts.
I'm really looking forward to the next conversation because A Swiftly Tilting Planet was really interesting, and there is some parallels to what's going on in the world right now in that book that was written 40 years ago. So fascinating, really, really fascinating. That's a wrap on this episode. I've been Space Admiral Kandas.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, 2nd class.
And I'm Valerie Friedlander.
And you have been listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod.